Hi, this is Andrew Koss at the studio at Strawberry Fields Lane, and this is one of my favorite miking techniques for adding depth and power to your drum recordings. This technique is especially effective in high energy music and works well in pop, punk, rock, metal, country, anytime you're looking for some extra grit and gnarliness to your drum sound. When I first saw an engineer do this, I thought there was no way this was going to sound good, but once I heard the results, well, no pun intended, I was floored. What I've got set up here are two small diaphragm cardioid condenser mics pointed straight down just a few millimeters off the floor. I'm using two Neumann KM184s, but mics like AKG 451s, Earthworks, Rode M5s will work great. The idea here is that you'll end up compressing the floor mics quite aggressively, but first, let's take a listen to how they sound directly recorded into my DAW. All right, now let's listen to those floor mics in context with the rest of the drum mix. I'll turn them off. Back on. Now let's hear how the mics sound with the added compression. You can do this with outboard gear or plugins, and we'll listen to both. But right now I'm using a pair of Imperial Lab Distressors, pushing them pretty hard. They're set in nuke mode with a very fast attack, fast release, and hitting about 12 to 14 dB of compression. Let's check it out. And compressor's off. And back on. Now let's listen to this with the compressors on in context of the drum mix. I'll turn off the tracks. I'll turn the distressors off and let's listen to the Slate virtual mix rack with their distressor model with pretty much the same settings as my actual distressors. You can see I've got them here. Same fast attack, fast release, nuke mode, distortion on. I've pretty much matched the settings knob for knob. Let's take a listen. And turn them off. So just a quick comparison. Here's the Slate distressors. And here's the actual distressors. They're really quite both effective, but I find the actual distressors have a smoother quality to them while still adding the crunch that I'm looking for. So this is really quite a bombastic punch that is added just by these two mics on the floor, but sometimes it might feel like too much. So something I like to do is use my snare track to trigger the expander on the floor mics so that we really only get that added extra hit, extra punch when the drummer's cracking down on the snare. So I've just got an aux send that I've labeled snare key up here, and it's just feeding two channel strips on these floor mics, and you can play with the attack and release to get to where you want, but essentially every time the snare drum hits, this expander is going to open up the floor mics so that we can hear them. Let's do it with the distressors for now, and I'll turn these on, and let's see what happens. Here we go with the expanders. So you can hear how they're slamming down when the snare comes off. By itself, it sounds a little funky, but let's add the whole drum kit together. And now let's turn the expanders off. So you can hear the dynamic change, how you get all that room the whole time. But if we add these back in, it still makes the snare feel huge, but the rest of the kit feels a little more contained. So let's take a listen to this setup in context with the whole track, with the rhythm section. Take them out. And you can see here in the bridge how I've automated this in so that we get that snare expansion in that section of the song because again, I just didn't want the kick drum and everything else overpowering with those floor mics because they're super cool, but sometimes it's just too much. So you'll see them turn on their automation here. So if we were to listen to that section without that automation, let's check out what happens. And turn the expanders on. So it just tightens up everything a little bit. So I like the automation here because I could control that in that section, but the rest of the song, I just want that full-on bombastic, huge drum sound. So there's really a lot more you can do with this, but I hope this motivates you to play around and possibly pull this technique out of your bag in a future session. I promise the drummer will think you're crazy at first and then be blown away with just how huge their drums sound.